afternoon. Today we are going to be discussing an overview of applications to leases. This is a great introductory video to become familiar with the process of taking an application all the way through the leases and billing out. In this video, we also do a brief review of 3 of the office forms: the application, the BLP application specifically, deal tickets and what those look like, as well as bill out forms. You'll also know there are some additional office forms such as the check request and deal receipt. We don't have video on those for this video. However, you certainly can take a look through them. They're pretty self-explanatory. All right, so we're going to start with the applications and deposits. So you've shown apartments and people are ready to apply. Now what? Well, the first thing you need to do is check You Got Listings for the landlord instructions. That's a good first place to look. We've talked about that in the previous videos regarding You Got Listings, especially look at the rentals tabs and click on the landlord to look at their listing sheet, see if there's any instructions on the landlord's listing sheet. That's in You Got Listings. Look for content that's given to us by the landlord. In most cases, they are trying to tell us how they want their leases prepared. You also will find that there's information in emails. Some of them will have their own documentation. So look to the handbooks that we have, and we have 1-pages on some of these landlords. We have informationals in the Google Drive for you. So review use the resources you have before taking any guesses or making any phone calls. I really shouldn't be taking guesses. Use the resources you have. As a second step, you have your mentor or the office manager who you can ask if you've looked everywhere and you're really not sure how to proceed. For this transaction, we're going to assume as we walk through, we're going to assume it's a Signer Realty transaction, which means we use our own application. We'll get to that in a second. All right. So the BLP application can be found on the Google Drive in the BLP form section. It can also be found in You Got Listings under the landlord Signer Realty. So if you click on any of the Signer Realty listings, search for Signer, S-I-G-N-E-R, it's right there for you. Make sure you click on the landlord name, and if you see a Signer Realty listing, you click on the landlord name, there'll be the rental applications right there under the saved documents. However, if you're in the office or anywhere else, Google Drive, under the BLP office share and then BLP forms, the rental application will be there for you. The RHA application, or as a lot of people call it, the standard form application, that can be found in Zip Forms. It does require a Zip Forms Plus account. You get that free with your NAR membership. You can also find an old copy of it in Google Drive. Some of the owners have forwarded us copies that they like to use. RHA applications will be requested, and many open listings are going to want to use either their own application or an RHA application. BLP applications for own exclusives, RHA applications, as it again also known as a standard app, use that for the open listings or where the landlords asked for it. Again, check the landlord instructions and You Got Listings before you start completing an application. You want to make sure you're following what they're asking for, because a lot of these owners will hold up your application and won't accept your applicant if you don't follow their process. All right, so once you've, let's take a look actually at the BLP application before we go any further. So I'm going to stop here for a moment. All right, we're going to share with you the BLP rental application. All right, so here's the rental application. We start off, it's 4 pages. On the first page is an application checklist and process overview. This is a receipt you can actually give to your customer. You can rip this first page right off and hand it to them. It has your name, your phone number, the address, the lease start date, the move-in date, the lease end date, all of that. Pretty straightforward. The amount of first month's application fee, rental commission, last month's rent deposit, security deposit, and move-in fee due. It also shows the payment schedule. You'll see the first month's rent and the application fee due with the application, the rental commission due at the lease signing, the last month's rent due within 2 weeks of the lease signing, and the security deposit due within 2 weeks of the collection of last month's rent deposit. If we're not collecting a last month's rent deposit, the owner doesn't ask for it and he just wants a security deposit, well, this should be that payment due directly after the last month's rent. If there's a move-in fee, you can collect that with the security deposit as well, or the last month's rent deposit if there is no security deposit. Just read through that a couple times. It may be a little confusing, but pretty straightforward. If there are any contingencies the tenant's asking about, you can write them here for them. Especially if you write contingencies, make sure you make a copy of this before you give it to the tenant, or even better, give the tenant a copy and you keep the original. You want to make sure you're keeping paper records of everything or written records of everything that you're agreeing to or presenting. Remember, the application is not an agreement. It's an offer to the owner. Okay, that's a very important concept. They're asking for something. They're making an offer to the landlord. Even if they're making a full rent, full price offer, as they'd say, still an offer. A couple things required to hold a deposit. We're trying to give the information to the customer, help empower you. The deposit equal to the rent, first month's rent, plus $25 per applicant is payable to BLP. Payments made within 30 days of move-in must be in the form of cleared funds. No cash accepted at any time. We don't want to get into the habit of accepting cash because cash gets lost. BLP application with all fields filled in. That's very important. We're going to get to that in just a second. Make sure you fill out those fields. Lease terms and money due completed by the agent prior to the tenant signing or the applicant signing. Very important distinction. You're filling out the terms of the application for them before they sign it. Otherwise, they're not signing anything. If in the unlikely event there are any fields that are not applicable, make sure you write in NA. That'll help the landlord or the property manager reviewing the application know that it wasn't a mistake to leave it. We'll get to that in just a minute. Review and signing the lease. Any additional information or documentation requested is due within 3 days of the request. This might include work references, a guarantor form, whatever the case might be. We're giving the customer 3 days to get that documentation together for the lease signing. Leases will be prepared by BLP and signed within a week of application, acceptance, or apartment placed back on the market. This is something, again, we're using our application and where we're the listing agent. It's our apartments. We want those leases signed. We don't want to wait forever to get them signed. If people aren't signing leases, it's a good indication that there's something wrong and maybe they're having second thoughts. Even though our intro form and our application says that the fee is due upon acceptance, regardless of whether or not they signed the lease, they still sometimes think that, well, if I don't sign the lease, maybe I can back out of the transaction. We try and convey that up front. That's why we have this commission agreement. You should read through the commission agreement. Make sure you put the property address, the lessor's, the landlord's name, monthly rent, the amount of the rent. That's also the amount of our fee, the date this is being signed, your name, and then have them sign and print their name here. This is just a secondary fee commission agreement that we wanted to put in front of people, again, so they know they can't just change their mind. Once they're accepted for the apartment, their deposits could be forfeited. So read through that, make sure you understand what it's saying there. All right, page 3 and page 4 are the actual applications. Make sure they initial, if they're over the age of 18, that they date the application the day they're filling it out. Fill in all their information, their current address, their social security number. That's often not put on for some reason. People feel like it's a security issue, but we do need their social security number to run their credit. If they are international and don't have a social security number, say that. Say international, no social. You can just type that right in. Emergency contact information. This is in case they're missing or there's a real problem. So international contact information is fine. We'll get a translator if we need to. If ever contact that emergency contact. Landlord history, current landlord and previous landlord. Well, their current addresses should be for their current landlord. That's pretty straightforward, right? Make sure, even if it's parents or dorm, they're living at home, they're living at school, write that in. We don't want to leave that blank. So if 123 Main Street's where they're currently living and that's a student housing for UMass Boston, well, write current landlord, UMass Boston student housing. Keep it simple. Previous address, if it was their parents' home, 456 Center Street, make sure the previous landlord is, just say parents. No problem there. If they didn't live at home and they didn't live in the dorm student housing, make sure you get that information. What we're looking for is these two addresses should coincide with the addresses on the credit reports we pull for these people. That's why it's so important. And we also, especially for our own listings, are going to be calling these landlords and getting references from them. If it's parents or a dorm, we're not going to call them. We're just going to assume everything was fine. The dorms won't give us information, and we'd be very surprised if the parents ever talk poorly about their children. So we'll assume that we're not going to get any references from parents or dorms, but anything else we want references from. Even if it's international, put the information down. We may not check it, but we do want to see that information. Student information. If they are an undergraduate student or a graduate student, you want to put that information in. You can see some of the information being requested is attach an enrollment verification form, an I-20, copy of their university schedule, or any other documentation that they can verify is for them and they're enrolled. If someone's a part-time student, you can typically omit this and just focus on their professional information. If it's a student, mark them as a student. If they're a professional, mark them as a professional, even if they're taking part-time classes. Same goes if a student works part-time, you typically can just ignore it. It'll complicate things more than it'll help their professional information, their part-time job. If it's working at Starbucks or a monitor for the computer lab or whatever the case may be, we're still going to need that cosigner. So it'll just create extra work for you. You can see under current employer, you've got their information, their occupation, their supervisor's name. We'll utilize that information in our customer relationship and management follow-up. Their yearly salary, a lot of times people put in a monthly or weekly, try and get that, or hourly even, annualize that, the length of employment. But then the last line is a former job or second employer. This is very important, especially if someone's been employed for less than a year and they have a former job. We consider anybody with a job, employment of less than 1 year full-time to be a new hire, and will typically have to have a cosigner. However, if they've relocated from a previous job of any amount of time, 3, 4, 5 years, so their former employer was full-time, we will waive that. We don't need to get a cosigner for someone who's been working for 4 or 5 years and then is relocating for a new job. However, we don't have that information, and we'll consider that a new hire, especially where the length of employment for their current job is less than 1 year. This is also a good place. This is a place for a part-time job. So someone is a teacher and works part-time as a coach, that additional income might help qualify them. So that's a good place to put. You can put the second employer in as well. Depending on what it is, make sure you circle it. So if it's the former employer, circle that. If it's the second employer, circle it so we can keep that straight. Now, the tenant's going to fill in the previous information. You need to fill in the next few lines. And you really should do that before you give it to the customer. So the address of the apartment they're applying for, the unit number, the date of occupancy, the date of occupancy, the date they actually move into the property, the term of the lease, the number of months and days, rent begins, the date the rent begins, pretty obvious. That actually maybe not, a little confusing. If the rent were to say begin on November 1st, but we're letting them move in on October 25th, well then rent begins would be November 1st. We're giving them a few days of free rent. So that date of occupancy might be a little earlier. And the from and to date are the dates the actual lease runs. So you take those dates from the lease. Typically, all four, the date of occupancy, the rent begins, and the from date are all the same. The to date, the end date, would be the only different one. However, there are situations where those might vary. Finally, we have on the final line that we have to fill in is the number of pets that they have, and then the type, if it's a dog, cat. I would also say add the weight if it's a dog. And then the name of any co-tenants. If it's a minor, so it's the husband's filling this out and the wife's filling out their own, but they have a child, they should each put each other's name on the application. So the husband has the wife's name, the wife has the husband's name. They both should have any minors. So they have a child, they should have the name of their minor on both of their applications and the age. If that is not there, then it could be an issue where they're misrepresenting the situation. The landlord has a requirement to provide a lead-free apartment for anyone under the age of 6. If we don't have the age and the existence of the minor on the application, and it may be a situation where they need 30 days to bring that property into compliance, you could have a real problem when the lessor finds out that the child exists and we can't deliver the property. He wants to hold it back for 30 days to bring the property into compliance. So make sure that that information's in there, or could be considered an omission on the application, and it actually could be the consumer, the applicant who's in default. Fill it in, very important. The other fields you need to fill in are first month's rent, last month's rent, security, rental fee, our commission, the application fee, that's per person, so $25 per person in our listings, and the key deposit, if there is one, or key fee. We didn't write fee or deposit because it could be a fee or it could be deposit, depends on the landlord. So you want to specify that. One thing to keep in mind, if it's zero, in other words, there's no last month's rent due as a deposit, write 0, fill that in. You can total up the total amount of money due. Now, this is not the money due necessarily today. We'll get to the payment schedule in just a minute, but actually we looked at the payment schedule before on the first page. This is the total amount of money due as part of this agreement. So over the next month, this is the funds that are due to the lessor. Then you have the offer valid until date. This is when the lease, this is when it would expire if the owner has not accepted it. All right, last few things you need on the application. You've got to fill it. You got to have them declare if they're a convicted felon, sign their name. Hopefully the answer is no, by the way. Sign their name, their date. Next is a release for us to do that background check and credit check. So they need to print their name, sign, and date. The next few lines are for office use. We talked about verifying the current landlord, the previous landlord history, the current work and school verification. You want to make sure you have that information on the application so you can do that. When whoever's verifying this information, if it's you or a property manager, these are the questions that you're going to be asking, and you can fill in the answers here. Finally, we have a disclosure in the terms of the agreement that in the small print here. Again, we're reiterating our fee is due upon acceptance of the application. There is one caveat here. If for some reason the lessor can't deliver the property to the applicant, then the funds would be owed back or refundable to the applicant. Of course, you wouldn't necessarily know that till it's far too late. We're going to get this application signed. We're going to put our name on it, and now we've completed the application. All right, jumping back. All right, so we've filled out the application. We need to collect the money. The first month's rent and app fee is due with the application. We talked about that already. It's in the application. Our fee is due upon the application being accepted. Okay, a lot of times we collect it at the lease signing, but it's due upon the application being accepted. Very important. We say due upon acceptance, payable at the lease signing. The last month's rent due within 2 weeks of the lease signing, security deposit, anything else are due within 4 weeks of the lease signing, or as we said before, if there is no last month's rent due, those are due within 2 weeks of the lease signing. We just move that payment schedule up. All right, so what do you do to take the apartment off the market? We're going to get that app to the lessor ASAP. If this is a Boston's Luxury Apartments or Signa Realty, a listing, get that application emailed over to Jason as soon as possible so he can review it. You want to get that notice by the lessor as quickly as possible. A lot of landlords will tell you how they want to see applications come to them. Follow those directions. Call, email, fax, hand deliver, whatever it takes. You should be paranoid. You've got a deal in your hands, get that deal to the owner. Don't forget to ask the owner, especially if it's a non-exclusive apartment. Has the apartment been taken off the market? If you're taking an application on a BLP or exclusive or a Signa Realty listing and it's a full price offer, make sure you mark that listing in the deal tracker so that you get to claim that deal. Very important that you mark that apartment as being rented in the deal tracker so that you get that deal. If you don't do it and someone else goes and verifies that it verifies from the deal tracker that the apartment hasn't been rented, and they go forward, take applications, and they update the deal tracker before you do, you'll probably not get the deal. The person who followed the process is going to get the deal. This is how we keep track of who's renting the apartment and who's first in. If you submit an application for a less than full price offer on a Signa Realty listing and exclusive, keep in mind that until that application's been accepted, the terms have been accepted, you can't take the apartment off the market. So it is a negotiating strategy for you. If you submit a full price offer, you can take that apartment right off the market immediately. If they want to negotiate on price, well, until they hear back from the management and the management's had a chance to review the application, that apartment's still on the market. As we said, enter the deal into deal tracker in the BLP office share. That is located right in the BLP office share on the main page. So go to that deal tracker and make sure you update it. Don't forget, after you've taken applications, that you've marked the unit as pending in YouGot listings if it's an exclusive listing. Again, if you're taking a less than full price offer on an exclusive listing, you cannot mark it as pending in YouGot listing until you get acceptance of the terms of your application. Okay, so what else? For exclusive only, you want to email Jason, apps, credits, and work references. If you don't have access to credits, at least forward the applications. If you're working on getting the work references, they can come in the next day. If the application is accepted, regardless of this is an exclusive or not, anything, as soon as you get that notice from the owner that the applicant's been accepted, you need to notify the applicants in writing as soon as possible. Again, you've just earned your commission once they've been accepted. This is what you're waiting for. Make sure you notify them in writing. A phone call is not acceptable. A text is marginally acceptable. An email is ideal. So my suggestion, email them. Again, phone call is not acceptable, and a text is really mailing it in. You can text them if you're just so you can get something out to them and then follow up with an email. By the way, take the chance to use that email as a follow-up of what's coming next. Schedule the lease, schedule the lease signing and the next payments, if any are due. Move forward with the transaction and get them excited, congratulate them. All right, the next thing we need to do is create a deal ticket and submit it to the office. The deposit must be included with the deal number and address of the apartment on the check. All right, fill out the deal ticket while the applicant is filling out the application. Okay, you want to get this done quickly. You don't want to spend all day in the office doing paperwork. So while they're filling out the applications, you fill out the deal ticket. For rentals where the landlord takes deposits and apps, submit the deal ticket once the app is received, and a check to the lessor is needed. So what that means is, even if we could take a deposit and we need to get a check to the landlord, we need to get that deal ticket and the deposit from the applicant, to the office as quickly as possible. Okay. More and more, we're giving those checks directly to the landlord. And in which case, you don't need to do a deal ticket until the application's been accepted. We know that, more and more we're collecting just our commission on non-exclusive rentals. All the other money is going directly to the owner or the listing agent, property manager, whatever it might be. All right, so let me pause here again. We're going to go back we're going to take a look at the deal ticket. All right, so here's the deal ticket. Really quick and easy form to fill out. We're going to fill in the agent name. We're going to fill in the move-in date. Pretty straightforward. That's the date that the tenant's taking occupancy, obviously. The address of the unit, the town and zip code of the unit. Please make sure you include the zip code. Who the check is payable to. This is very important. It's not always the person whose name appears in You Got Listings. It might be an LLC for the landlord. If it's a listing that we utilize all the time, you can skip the landlord address, like an Ashcan rental or a Hamilton company rental. But if it's an open listing, someone we don't work with all the time, we need that landlord address. Here you're going to record all the monies that are due, the first month's rent, last month's security deposit, if there is any, app fee, the total app fee, so you can multiply the number of people times the app fee, so forth. A couple of things to keep in mind. There are two lines. There's the fee paid by the tenant, that's the total amount paid by the tenant, and the fee paid by the landlord. So if the landlord's paying the fee, you use one line. If the tenant's paying the fee, you use the other line. If they're sharing the fee, you put half and half, or whatever the case might be, you split it up. Co-broke, well, that's the fee that's going out to a cooperating agent. So if we're collecting a $1,900 fee on a rental and it's a co-broke, we might be giving $950 of that to another agent. That's where you can put that in. In that case, let's say the landlord's paying the $1,900, well, you put $1,900 under the fee paid by landlord and $950 under co-broke. Okay. One thing to keep in mind about this is monies paid to BLP only. We are not interested in monies paid to the landlord or anybody else. This is for our accounting purposes only. So these are only checks that are made payable to Boston's Luxury Properties. If the check is being made payable to another company, the listing agent, the property manager, then you don't need to include it on this form. We're going to put the deal number in. That's your initials and the date, the deal, the year. This is a 2016 deal tracker. So your initials, the deal number, and then the deal sequence. So 001, 002, and so forth. The date, the first deposit paid, that's the date of the application, the lease start date, the lease end date, make sure those are filled in. And then put those tenant names, phone numbers, and emails in here legibly. This is a backup list we use to keep track of everybody, especially from the accounting department. They need to reach somebody for a bounce check or a missing payment. We want to be able to make sure they can get in touch with them and help you collect those monies. Pretty quick and simple form. You can do this, like I said, while they're filling out the application. Shouldn't take much time at all. All right. So we're going to jump back to the presentation. As we've said in other manuals, supporting documentation needs to be here within 3 days. You want to get these deals done quickly. Don't let them linger. Copy of the work contract, job offer letter, 2 pay stubs, an I-20 for international students, a guarantor information form. The guarantor notary form we do need to get. We're a little more lenient because we need the original back, and that needs to be mailed. It's definitely due before occupancy. Really shouldn't take more than a week to get that guarantor notary form back. If this is a quick move-in, someone's applying today and wants to move in 2 or 3 days, you gotta get that guarantor notary form overnighted to us. The original copy only must be notarized. The guarantor information form, that can be emailed or faxed back to us, by the way. That does not need to be mailed. It's the guarantor notary form that we need the original copy of. We need to verify landlord references. If you're responsible for that, you need to do that immediately. Take that application, go call those landlords, verify the references. All right. prepare and sign leases within 3 days. Follow the YouGot Listings or landlord-specific instructions. We have a video on how to do an ashcan lease. Ramon leases are done by the office. You don't need to do that. So watch those videos, or the ashcan lease example lease, how to write a lease in Zip Forms. You do need Zip Forms Plus access to do this, so make sure you have that. Sign leases within 3 days from the application acceptance. We've got that. Zip Forms to create the lease. Some landlord-specific leases can be found on Google Drive. Feinberg, for example. Hamilton Company has their own lease generator, so go back to YouGot Listings or in the BLP manuals and one-page section. There's going to be information on some of these owners, but we've left breadcrumbs for you, so you should be able to find out which lease to use and where to go to get that lease. If we're creating the lease, it's typically going to be done in Zip Forms. Once you get that lease signed, you want to get that over to the lessor as quickly as possible. If any money is due from the office, you're going to get a check request. We haven't covered that in this video, but pretty quick and simple form. One thing to keep in mind, one check request per check. So if you're asking for one check for the last month's rent and one check for the security deposit, that's two separate check requests, two pieces of paper. You can't combine two check requests for two different checks into one piece of paper. We need to be able to keep track of each check request for the accounting. All right, so prepare a package for the landlord. You need the money for the landlord, original app and credit, original co-signer. Actually, an amendment to this video, we no longer give the landlord credit, so you can remove credit that is not active. Anywhere you see credit, we're not giving that to landlords anymore. We're reviewing credit for our exclusive landlords, but we don't share credit with anybody anymore. That is a federal regulation that's part of Dodd-Frank that we now follow now that we're aware of it. Make sure you forward to the lessor 2 applicant-signed or tenant-signed leases to originals. If you're signing electronically, they're considered originals because they have a timestamp, so you just need to print out 2 copies of those to give to the owner. When the tenant comes to move in, you're going to ask the lessor how to coordinate move-in. This should be done when you're giving them the move-in package, or even when you're preparing the lease. You should know how to coordinate the move-in well in advance. Don't wait till the last minute. Don't wait till, if it's August, or if it's a September 1st move-in, don't wait till August 15th to find out how the tenant takes occupancy. Ask about that when you take the application. For exclusives, you can email Jason 10 days prior to the move-in, and you can get an update as to whether or not the tenant might have moved out or not early. You can also talk to Mahari for Ramones. Ashcan will deliver the keys and the parking passes the day before the move-in date. Agents should verify keys are working prior to giving them to the tenants. Go to the apartment, walk through the place, take a look and see if there's any, if the place is in good shape the day before move-in. Make sure the keys work. This is a great value add to your customer. If you can, when you give the keys out, if you can tell them, hey, I found a couple of issues. I called the owner. The owner's aware of it. He's going to be there tomorrow morning to fix everything. But I just wanted to let you know, they're going to find value in that. So you're not just verifying the keys, you're making sure the apartment's in good condition. All right, so you've done everything you need to do. Now you got to get billed out. You want to get paid. So the bill outs are the last thing that are done. You've got to have everything else completed. We have all the money in, all the paperwork done, everything, all the documentation recorded correctly. This is it. Your first thing you're going to do, make sure that the documentation is scanned and uploaded into Prospect Converter. There is a video on how to upload the documentation in Prospect Converter, and it's very important that you've done that correctly. If you don't do that, your bill out will get kicked back and delayed. We don't like delaying on paying you, so make sure you've done that correctly. Watch that video. Deal ticket, that scan, by the way, needs to include a deal ticket. The intro form, absolutely required. Copy of any money that's been received by the office. Any paperwork like applications or supporting documents, that needs to be in there. If the property was built before 1978, it is absolutely mandatory that the tenant lead paint certification signed by the lessor and the tenant is included with those uploaded documents. So make sure you get that document. If you're cooperating with another agent and they're the listing agent, make sure you get that handled ahead of time. You can even get one from them when you do the application. There's nothing to say that form can't be done well in advance. Get ahead of the situation. So the only federally required document in the lease, by the way, that tenant lead paint notification is a federally required document. It's the only one that's required. Keep in mind, it's only required for properties built before 1978. You're going to use the bill out checklist to verify money is collected, the landlord paid, move-in package prepared, and correctly uploaded. Then you turn in all paper documentation in the office. According to WISP, you need to do that. We don't want any paper documentation floating around. Our digital documentation is password protected. Our digital documentation is in password protected programs. It's secured on encrypted devices. So if we keep things digital and we make sure that we're using proper security protocols on those, then we will not have to worry too much. If you turn in all the paper documentation, you have your digital backups, everybody's got what they need. Want to jump back over to see that form, bill out form. Okay, so here's the bill out form. Few things to keep in mind on the bill out form while you're filling this out. The deal number, again, your initials, the year, and then the sequence, 001, 002, whatever the deal number is, deal sequence is. Your name, the address of the apartment, total fee collected, please make sure you put that in. If you're billing out before occupancy, by default, this is called a draw. Please make sure you circle that. As a backup, we have you put the move-in date of the tenants moving in. Make sure you've entered that. And then the commission split, what your percentage is. More and more, we have agents cooperating with each other. So there's a percentage of the commission split to each agent. If it's only you, you can just put your commission split in. If it's being divided between multiple agents, we'll put that percentage under each line with that agent's name. Then you'll see 3 columns. On the right, you see one that says office use only. Left one and the middle one are for your use. First, you're going to check off what you actually have. You're going to print this form, by the way, and it's the easiest way to do it, and just simply check off what you have. You're going to check off the documentation you have. You're going to check off that you scanned the paperwork to a PDF. Lastly, you're going to upload everything into Prospect Converter and then make sure that they've actually been uploaded by going into Prospect Converter. Watch the video if you're not sure how to do this. Upload the documentation and then verify that it's been uploaded by clicking on it again. So you're given 2 columns for a reason. One is to actually check off what you have. The second is to check off that it's actually been uploaded correctly. If you follow this procedure, you're very likely to get paid immediately. No holdups. Very often people only use the left column. They don't verify that they've done everything. And we end up having an issue with something missing, and it does hold up payments. Again, we don't want to hold up your payments, so please make sure you're filling this out. Okay, so back to the presentation. If you request a draw and you get paid on it, to get the balance of the funds owed to you, you just need to take that original bill out form. We'll give you a copy of that back if it's a draw, and resubmit it upon move-in. That's all you need to do to get the balance of that draw paid out to you. So that's it. Really, about 30-minute presentation on what you need to do. If you get confused throughout the process, watch this video over again. Hopefully this has answered most of your questions, and you'll be doing many applications and many bill outs over the next few years. Look forward to working with you.